The man squeezed out a glob of flying fish paste aged for 20 years. Then he rubbed it evenly with both hands and smeared it all over his enemy's thick beard. The man instantly recoiled, unable to open his eyes from the stench, but he dared not move a muscle. The next second, the man pulled out a knife. He yanked the enemy's head back hard and began to shave him upward from the neck up. The victim was too terrified to even blink. He swallowed nervously, while the man, excited by his fear, grinned wider. Grabbing his hair, the man began a merciless battle with the razor. His enemy stared at the sharp blade in horror, trembling uncontrollably. Only once the beard was completely gone did the man finally lower the knife. But before his enemy could even breathe, he slammed a drug-soaked cloth over his mouth and held it tight. The man struggled to scream, but his body was paralyzed. Moments later, he fell unconscious. Then, the man dragged his enemy into an operating room. He tightly bound him with double-layer bandages, laid down clean sheets, and after preparing everything, he called in his trusted brothers. All of them put on surgical gowns and pulled on gloves. They were ready to confiscate the tool of his crimes. Because the man's daughter had been killed by this monster, there was no hesitation, only cold determination in his eyes. He took a blood serum bag from the fridge, drew out a few drops and fed it into a machine. After 2 minutes of fusion, a synthetic piece of human skin was created. He placed it on the man's stomach, smoothed it out with a cotton swab, then used a blowtorch to fully fuse the skin to his body. After that, Dr. Robert picked up a knife and began a precise cut along the man's thigh, transforming Vicente into a girl. When he woke up, he found himself lying on an operating table, tubes pierced into his arms. He tried to move, but couldn't feel a thing. Vicente was completely shaken. He desperately asked what he had done to him. Dr. Robert calmly replied, "Just took away the tool you used to commit your crimes. Remember the girl you hurt last year? She was my daughter. She couldn't take the trauma and jumped off a building. So don't even dream of leaving this place." Tears streamed down his face as Vicente finally realized this was his fate, and there was no escape. He begged Dr. Robert to spare him. Dr. Robert only sneered. "The real show is just beginning." After getting off the operating table, he rushed to see if it was all true. He grabbed a stool, stood before the mirror, and saw a woman staring back at him. Furious, he stepped down. Just as he was about to erupt, Dr. Robert opened the door and walked in. He quickly forced a smile, pretending not to care. Dr. Robert reassured him, "No need to be afraid. I brought you something useful. Use 1 shot a day, and the wound won't heal. Then with another surgery, you'll become a real woman." With that, he dragged him back into the operating room. Under Dr. Robert's masterful hands, his once masculine features and deep voice vanished completely. To protect the new skin, Dr. Robert gave him a tight bodysuit and sealed his face with a mask. Every day, he was locked inside the villa. He couldn't accept this twisted reality. Seizing a chance, he elbowed Dr. Robert to the floor and dashed toward the door. But escape wouldn't come so easily. Dr. Robert hit a button on the remote. The door locked automatically. If there was no escape, then death would be his final protest. Without hesitation, he grabbed a knife and slashed his own throat. Dr. Robert panicked at the sight. The punishment hadn't even begun yet. How could he die now? He scooped him up and rushed back to the operating room. Fortunately, he acted in time. The victim survived. But the flawless skin had been ruined. As Dr. Robert looked at him, a far more sinister idea began to form. A revenge that would cut deeper than any blade. The man grafted synthetic pigskin onto his enemy's body. He was preparing to turn him from a man into a woman. Step by step, he cut the skin according to the template. Then, he carefully laid it flat across the enemy's stomach. After smoothing it with cotton swabs, he placed another piece on the neck, covering up the scar from the suicide attempt. To make the skin look flawless, Dr. Robert applied 2 full layers. Only when the wounds disappeared did he stop. The synthetic skin he developed felt real. and it was incredibly tough. No insect could pierce it, and even fire wouldn't leave a mark. Once the full-body graft was complete, Robert moved on to his next goal, breaking the mind. He wouldn't stop at the body. He wanted his enemy to believe he was a woman deep inside. So every day, Robert brought him dresses, expecting him to learn how to wear them. But Vicente would never submit. For every dress Robert sent, he shredded it with scissors, then vacuumed the pieces away. Robert saw it all, but didn't flinch. Compared to his daughter's death, this pain was nothing. Vicente deserved worse. Robert doubled down, this time with makeup. He sent boxes of cosmetics, but Vicente stared blankly, unmoved, except for one eyebrow pencil. With it, he scrawled affirmations across the walls. I am a man. No matter what I look like, I am still a man inside. Faced with Vicente's defiance, Robert turned up the pressure. He played endless loops of female-focused videos. How to make dolls. How to maintain your figure. Even tutorials on wearing hairbands. And over time, Vicente did begin to change. Subconsciously, he started accepting this new identity. Months passed. He started crafting dolls. The table filled with his handmade creations. He even wore a floral dress and followed yoga routines on the screen. Vicente was starting to look more and more like a woman. He even began to think that this new life wasn't so bad. During his free time, he'd read books, but little did he know, this simple act had Robert completely mesmerized. He stared, more and more entranced. So lost in the moment, he forgot this was the man who killed his daughter. Feelings of affection began to stir within him. He no longer glared with hatred like before. Instead, he started having casual conversations with him. Vicente didn't resist either. He warmly held Robert's hand and asked if there was anything else he could improve, seeing that charming gaze. Robert replied, "You're already perfect." Vicente looked deeply into his eyes and expressed his desire to live together with him. That completely shocked Robert. He ran off in a panic. After all, Vicente had murdered his daughter. Becoming a woman didn't erase that hatred. The grudge still remained. Little did he know, his mother saw everything and understood what was happening in Robert's heart. Vicente now resembled as Robert's late wife. She knew he had never gotten over her death, so she advised him, just kill Vicente. You might have changed his gender, but this person is no longer under your control. He's smart and unpredictable. One blink and he'll outwit you. You simply can't outplay him. But Herbert didn't know what he was feeling anymore. The hatred had completely disappeared. Without hesitation, he rejected his mother's suggestion. He even fired all the servants in the house. He didn't want anyone knowing Vicente existed. And so, they lived quietly for a while. But one day, unexpectedly, an unwelcome guest arrived. It was Robert's half-brother. His mother was terrified. He had always been trouble, tied up with gangs and shady dealings. His arrival could only mean bad news. Sure enough, not long after, the TV broadcast a news flash, bank robbery, and the suspect's face was clearly him. Now, he didn't bother hiding. He admitted he was on the run and came to hide out, and asked Robert to give him a new face. Then he went to grab a drink, and turned, only to spot Vicente on the screen. That face. It was hauntingly familiar. Years ago, he had taken his sister-in-law out, and they'd gotten into a car crash. She died that day. So who was this person now? Whoever it was. If they belonged to Robert, then he wanted them for himself. The mother sensed danger. She quickly pulled a gun to stop him, but she was no match for him. In mere seconds, she was tied to a chair, and the man stormed into the room with wicked intentions toward Vicente. But he had no idea. He was about to bring doom upon himself. He transformed his enemy from a man into a woman. But, unexpectedly, he fell in love with his enemy, rushing to see him every day after work. But today, when he entered the room, he found his mother tied to a chair, and then, on the security footage, he saw his mother being hurt. In an instant, Robert was consumed by rage. He grabbed his gun and stormed into the room. Without saying a word, he shot him dead. Afterwards, Robert drove the body out and buried it in the outskirts. Returning to the villa, he threw all the bed linens into the fire, burning them to ash. This event made Robert realize something. He knew he shouldn't have imprisoned Vicente, so he decided to let him live freely in the villa. The next day, Vicente prepared breakfast for Robert. Robert was surprised, but also puzzled. But when he saw the knife on the plate, he realized Vicente had the chance to kill him, but he didn't do it. Had he fallen in love with me? Robert slowly let his guard down around Vicente. With a smile, he popped a strawberry into his mouth. Vicente said he would never leave. He would always stay by Robert's side. Robert replied tenderly, "I hope you won't disappoint me." But in truth, this was all part of Vicente's plan to buy time. Later that afternoon, Vicente, wearing a floral dress, was going shopping with his mother. He had promised to restore Vicente's freedom, so he didn't think much of it. But just then, one of Robert's colleagues who had been involved in the surgeries arrived. He handed Robert a newspaper with a missing persons ad which featured the person who had undergone surgery. "Isn't this the person you turned into a woman?" Robert refused to admit the truth. He claimed that the man had begged him for the surgery. Now, he was living well in Los Angeles. His colleague ignored him and kept talking about how the man's mother had been searching for him for years. "If you know where he is, you should tell her." Robert grew increasingly irritated. He pulled a gun from his drawer and said, "Get out of here." His colleague froze in fear. As they stood there in a tense standoff, Vicente rushed in. He explained, "If the person you're looking for is me, Robert hasn't kidnapped me. I'm here voluntarily, and I've always been a woman." With that, he sat down on Robert's lap. His colleague, seeing this, could do nothing but leave in resignation. Vicente's actions had won Robert's complete trust, but little did he know, it was this very trust that would lead to his downfall. That evening, Robert urgently needed a specific medication. Vicente said he'd gone shopping and bought some new ones. As he went downstairs to get it, he accidentally saw the missing persons ad. It was his mother's ad. She had been searching for him for years. Seeing that familiar yet strange face, Vicente completely broke down. Memories of past torment flooded back. He recalled the suffering he endured at Robert's hands, and the pain of being imprisoned. How could he ever forget those humiliations? How could he forget that he had once been a man? After much hesitation, Vicente finally made a decision. He quietly grabbed his bag, went to the bedroom, and threw the medication at Robert. Taking advantage of his unguarded moment, Vicente quietly pulled out a gun from his bag and pointed it at Robert. With disbelief on his face, he asked, "Didn't we promise to always be together?" Vicente, with tears in his eyes, replied, "I've been lying to you all along," and with a heavy heart, he pulled the trigger. With a gunshot, Robert fell dead on his own bed. His mother, startled by the sound, knew that disaster had struck. By the time she ran to the room with the gun, it was already too late. Before she could mourn, Vicente, hiding under the bed, reached out with his gun. The old woman was shot dead. Vicente had finally gained his freedom. He ran and ran until he reached a place that was his own. But his mother could no longer recognize him. What would Vicente's life be like from now on? Perhaps this was his punishment. The suffering he had to bear. The consequences of hurting a girl. Living the rest of his life in a woman's body was the price he had to pay.